I can honestly say that I didn't expect 464 comments on that last video. Now, with everything being said, that last video, I made it because I wanted to open up a discussion between the winner of the game of the year and one of the newer, more popular games, because there was a very large gap between when God of War came out and when Red Dead Redemption 2 came out. In this video, what I really want to do is kind of look at some of you guys' comments, because some of them I think were very good, and I really want to kind of applaud the people who took the time to articulate what they felt and what they thought and given their reason. And at the end of this, I'm going to give my opinion on what I think what you guys were talking about. And why don't we just start it off with Amazing SKM. So Amazing says, God of War brought single player games back from the brink. It made the gaming industry examine EA's statement that single player games were dead and tell them that they were completely wrong. Skip ahead. Red Dead Redemption 2 is great, but it did not do anything for the industry. I really do not agree with that. I think that there were a lot of really good single player games, not talking about specifically focused action games, but there were some very good single player games that were in the open world space that I'm sure a lot of you know a lot about, namely Breath of the Wild, which was last year's winner. That was a very popular and very good single player experience. Another game that was very popular last year and was a very good single player experience was Horizon Zero Dawn. That was a great game. I'm pretty sure a lot of people played it. Maybe you liked it, maybe you didn't like it. It was in a bit of an open world space, but it was still a very dope game, and it was still very well acted, had a great story, very interesting, and I wouldn't say it was overly emotional, but it was still a good single player experience. Was it on the, action, emotion tip, same, caliber as God of War? Of course, not quite, but that was a very different type of game. Again, it was in a single player, in an open world space, and open world games don't tend to be as bang, bang, bang as something that has almost seemingly levels, although God of War did have periods where you could go around in an almost open world setting, but still really nail it and bang it out. Similar to Spider-Man, but I think Spider-Man really fell short in that department in terms of the missions. I don't think the missions were nearly as fun or as good as God of War. God of War was a great game. Don't get me wrong. I love action games. I think it was a very good game and better than Spider-Man by far. But to say that it won because it revolutionized gaming and it, made EA eat its words because there were no other good single player games, I think that is false. Nier was another game that came out last year that was a great single player experience, and it revolutionized, or it at least made people think about how they play games, and it introduced a lot of different mechanics, and it did do it very, very well. I think if you haven't played any of those three games and you've only played God of War, you should probably look at that. And another great game that came out in 2016 was Uncharted 4. How quickly we forget. That's not even that long ago. That's 2 years ago. A couple of those, there's some Sony exclusives. 3 games out of that whole list are some Sony exclusives, but Sony has really pushed trying to get the single player experience to its fans, because they know that's what they built a lot of their brand on. And I haven't felt like there weren't enough single player games for me to play. There've been a lot. I think just a lot of them don't get as much shine as they should. And if it took God of War winning to kind of get people more interested in talking about single player games and saying, look, this is what single player games should be like, then I'm all for that. Now, in defense of Red Dead Redemption 2, moving along, I thought another really good comment was by Comic Normal. Comic Normal says, God of War was great. I've seen it, but in terms of something being repetitive, God of War takes the cake. Same animations, every boss fight, same executions, and besides Midgard, every level was a copy of the other. I love God of War, but it really only had one theme in the story, and it was badass. Don't get me wrong, badass is great, but that shouldn't be the only theme. Red Dead not only had badass, but it also had more. It was funny, of course, badass, serious, and excruciatingly sad, and it had many more. The main character, who not only had a cool voice, but the soul gave Kratos soul. This time around, it was, I'll give it, but wasn't enough. That's why they added Atreus, to give Kratos more soul. Without Atreus, we get the point. And I think he made a really good point in terms of the character development and how a lot of people pushed it. A lot of people were saying in the comments that God of War had such an amazing story and it was so great because it got reinvented, and Kratos' story was more about being a dad, and it really connected and bonded with people. My argument against that is I think Atreus really was the kind of shining force or the kind of anchor within the game that made it amazing. I think without Atreus, the game would have fallen very, very flat. And I think not enough people give the character of Atreus enough credit. I think that Atreus started off as this heartbroken boy who was trying to get to know a stranger, right? And he had to go on this very personal journey with a stranger that he knew, of course, was his dad, but he had no connection to him. And throughout the course, he felt like he wanted to prove himself to be his own man, to say that he could stand on his own. And with all of that being said, there was that conflict between the two of them. And because of that, Kratos did develop into a deeper character. And I really do think that not enough people give Atreus, or at least the character of Atreus, and how he changed over time. Not only Kratos did change a bit, but he started off a bit tender in the beginning, trying his best to involve this boy into his life. Whereas Atreus was growing as a character, growing as a young man, growing as a hunter, growing as a fighter, and trying to discover things, but yet still show and help his father that really was just in a really bad, broken space. And I think that the dynamic of those two told a really great story, and it really did hit home for a lot of people, and it really did follow a good path and a good pace, which is why I think God of War ended up winning, because it really was a very polished game in terms of what it was. The presentation, the action, the visuals, and a lot of things. It was a very polished game, and I think really the polish is what took it over the top to win it. The polish and the advertisement. I think that the hype behind God of War was very, 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 very high. I'm not saying that Red Dead's hype wasn't high. It gained a lot of steam towards the closer that it got to its release, but God of War was really growing in terms of a lot of things when it was being shown off. I'm sure Sony sunk a lot of money into the advertisement for it. And if I had to put my finger on why I think God of War really won it, not to say that it was a game that completely revolutionized the gaming industry, because I don't necessarily think that it was. I think that technically it was a technically amazing game. It was no loading screens and all of that stuff, no cutaways. That was technically amazing. The story was very good. The performances, I think, between Atreus and Kratos were excellent. They were very, very personal and very close, and it really did really did bring something special to gaming. But I will not be able to say that it it jump started first person games and it saved the day. I don't think it did. You can disagree with me and call me all kinds of stuff and let me know what you think. I do think that Red Dead Redemption 2 had I can't say a better story, but I can say it immersed people more, depending on who you were. I think some people were more immersed in the action of in the action of God of War. But I think the overall experience with Red Dead was what made it special. And in a lot of ways, I think that it did bring something to the industry. And in a lot of ways, I think that it did revolutionize a lot of things within the industry, because it too was technically a really good game. Now, before anybody says, "Oh, you're hating on this game over the other," I'm very neutral towards both of them. I love both games. I think they're both very good games, but they're very different games, and I think a very different player will be playing a very different game. The way that I can kind of think about this, and that I think is one way to look at it, is you have a lot of people that flew through Red Dead Redemption 2. They flew through it and they tried their best to get to the end of it. I'm not saying everybody, but I'm saying that a lot of people really didn't take the time to see what was going on with side quests. They didn't really talk to a lot of the minor characters. They didn't really do a lot of the kind of tedious tasks of things that a normal person would do on an everyday in that situation. And I think that if I had to compare it to something, I would kind of compare it to if you were taking out somebody who was a competitive eater and you took them to a restaurant and you bought a really nice dinner, and then you just kind of forced it down their throat and made them hurry up and eat it. And then as soon as they were done, you ran out of the place and then you started going home. And then after that, you asked them what the restaurant was like. How would you rate the restaurant? They didn't really get a chance to eat the meal. They didn't really get a chance to absorb it. They didn't really get a chance to see everything around it. They got the basic thing that you go there for, but they didn't really get the entire experience. And I'm not saying that everybody is like that, but I'm saying that people who think Red Dead didn't do anything maybe went through it a little bit too fast. And that's my opinion. That's how I think about it. Do I think God of War should have won Game of the Year? Honestly, I can't say that I think it should have won Game of the Year, but should it have beaten Red Dead? For the timing that when Red Dead came out, I think that God of War had a lot more exposure and it had a lot more polish and it had a lot more going for it going into the award show, because it had a history. It had likable characters. It had popular characters. It was by a very big studio. It was promoted by Sony. It was pushed through Sony with the best technical aspects of the PlayStation 4 in mind. And then you have Red Dead kind of coming in right before the end of the show. Not really enough time to really thoroughly go through it. And as amazing as it is and as amazing as it was, I think if they really wanted to win a game show award, they should have put it out next year. That's my opinion. I think that it would have easily won if it had come out in January. For next year, it is what it is. And that's the gaming industry. So I'd like to know what you think. I think that God of War won because it was polished. I think that it won because it was very, very polished and it hit home for a lot of people. It had memorable characters and it did a lot of things perfectly. Was it everything that everyone wanted? No, of course not. I think a lot of people wanted something to do after they finished the campaign and finished the story. I'm happy that they didn't put multiplayer on there, but I think that a lot of people want more from their games. And some people might say that, games as a service like Destiny and The Division and things like that and Overwatch, those types of games are not really the types of games that they want to play. They just want to get in, get out. They have a family, they have a life, they have things to do, and they want to enjoy their story and they want to enjoy the gameplay, and they want that immersive feeling for however long they have to play, and they don't want to have to keep grinding. Other people, the other way around. So it kind of depends. Let me know what you guys think. We're following this up. If you are new to the channel, I want to try my best to spark conversation. I want people to be able to talk about things and talk about gaming. And if it's gaming related, then we should talk about it and represent real gamers. You know, there's a lot of critics out there that may not feel the way that we feel or have the passion that we have, or maybe they play so many games that they don't really understand what it's like to get a game and have only 1 or 2 games or three games in a year that you're going to play. And I think that we should talk about it. So please try your best. Keep it civil in the comments. And until the next video, I'm Khan, and I will see you. Take it easy. Peace.
Khan.